After swimming her way out of the deep water that she luckily landed in after the fall from the surface with the medium rook and the strange skeleton above from the outskirts of the city of Parapet, Sybil looks around and begins climbing for a little bit better of a view. She grabs a handhold of what looks like just normal cavernous rock, unworked, unhewn stone, but immediately pulls her hand back as she cuts it on some sharp barnacles or mollusk-like creatures that seem to be covering every surface of the slick, wet rock down here in the chamber she finds herself in. She looks around to get a bearing and sees that this is but one room in a strange complex down here. This is a discovery in itself, something that Sybil may not be excited in the moment that she has found, but a part of her is very excited to be here and break the monotony of her otherwise regular routine life up in the city of Parapet. She looks around and sees an exit to a nearby room, but before she can make her way there, something splashes to the surface of the water she landed in and begins flailing all over the place. Certain sections of the water begin to freeze, and a small rookling begins bobbing on the surface, unable to get out of the water. Sybil looks over and rolls her eyes. Again, she's a rooksmith. She is somebody who works mostly on mounted and arms. I imagine she views rooklings as kind of little nuisances. I like that as an opposite to my last character from my Colostle series. I like the idea that Sybil, as somebody who is constantly tinkering with rook parts, looks at these tiny little rooklings that are in the core of every rook, and by all accounts, not violent, friendly little companions to people of the surface world in Colossal, in the Roomlands. But because she is a tinkerer and an inventor, and she likes to dissemble rook parts and find useful things for them, she probably does not like rooklings because you can't just scrap them for parts, and they do have their own little personalities, and if she wants a helper, it's just going to be a kid from the neighborhood or whatever. And I think that it's just a funny personality trait that I think will make this interesting. But she looks over at this small little rookling, clearly an ice rookling, trying to freeze parts of the water to grab onto like an ice floe or what have you, and grabbing onto like anything it can as things begin to float to the surface from the splash and breaking of that medium rook that we brought down with us. And she rolls her eyes and walks waist deep into the water, uses her arm to extend out towards where this rookling is struggling and just grab onto it. And she pulls the rookling over to the edge where it kind of stands up. It leans a little bit and a bunch of water comes out of one of like the crenellations of its little rookling body, and it just empties all of this water from the cistern out and just kind of like does a little jumping around to either side. And she goes, "Yeah, look, don't mention it. I really don't need you tailing me this entire time, but if we're both stuck down here, stay close, okay?" And I think in response, this rookling actually reaches down and lifts up a couple of things that it grabbed onto when it was trying to bob to the surface and get out, and it holds up two components that we would have collected from this medium rook. And drawing from the deck, I got a crank and a lock and key. So those are two components we can begin to think about as far as what Sybil might make from them. And from the looks of it, as Sybil looks back towards the next room in this labyrinth, she might need all the tools she can get her hands on. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Colossal Dungeons. I'm very excited to flesh out Sybil some more and find out what's going on down here in the dungeons. I love these new books from everything from the Roomlands and onward from the Colossal world, because they do have these sort of canon dungeons or adventures or things like that in them. And I am going to be exploring a good amount of canon official Colossal content in this series. So if you are listening to this, but you do intend on delving the dungeons yourself in the game of Colossal, then proceed with caution. There probably will be spoilers, and I don't want to ruin some of these dungeons for you for your playthroughs. But if you are otherwise just listening to get a feel for the game, I hope that you enjoy it. Full disclosure, I did actually play this dungeon prior to recording it, because reading about it ahead of time, it does say you may want to make your journal entries after, because a lot happens pretty quickly, and I wanted to see what the process was, and before I knew it, I was deep into it, so I took a bunch of notes, and you're going to be getting the play report. So this will be a little bit different of an episode. Before we get into the episode, though, let's do some announcements for the month of September. I don't think I did before, and we're just going to cover September and October here. We are back to my usual scheduling system, so weeks 1 and 3 will be the main solo series campaign of Colossal going forward. Week 2 will always be a perspective checks. This month it was Willow, the RPG Goblin. I hope that you listened and enjoyed that episode about finding more TTRPGs for you, matching your style, your vibes, what you're into, and finding and learning those things, and branching out. Even if you think something might not be for you, if you give it a read or sit down and try it, you might be surprised what you like. And that's only ever going to make future games and decisions and things like that you make more enjoyable for you. All right, the end of this month for September is going to be a Mining Media episode on Claire Obscure Expedition 33, a Game of the Year contender. I haven't had a lot of time to play video games lately in my life, but I picked this one up because it's a indie turn-based sort of JRPG, but with really French flares, and oh my gosh, I could not stop playing this game. It's very good. Highly recommend, and the Mining Media should be pretty interesting, I think. It is a bonus episode month for September. There are 5 Tuesdays, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. I think it's going to be a one-player one-shot. Stay tuned for that. And then in October, we're going to do another usual month of Colossal on weeks 1 and 3. We're doing a perspective checks with Kate the Great Cosplays about the community overlap between TTRPGs and the cosplay world, and how those two things actually really blend well towards getting into character and TTRPGs in general. And then, of course, October is going to have spooky month one-shots and things like that, so stay tuned. All right, I think that does it. Let's play some Colossal. Some notes before we dive into my experience with the Cistern, one of the major labyrinths from Colossal Dungeons. To kick off this series, some notes on how labyrinths and major labyrinths work in dungeons. Labyrinths are a new feature in the Dungeons book of Colossal that you may end up creating due to one of the prompts from your exploration phase. Now, with normal labyrinths, you will place cards face down in any pattern you choose, branching paths, one snaking path, however you want to do it, but there will be guardians and treasure within these labyrinths. They're really cool, and I'm sure we will do one on this series at some point, but there are separate rules, more specific rules, for the major labyrinths, which are the 5 dungeons at the back of this book. Some of them have requirements to be found, but 2 of them really didn't, so that's why I decided when Sybil fell through the hole in the surface up above that she would fall into one of these major labyrinths. We ended up with the Cistern. So major labyrinths differ. We are not going to randomly generate them through card draws and like an exploration phase. We are not going to put cards face down and create a winding path or anything like that. Instead, there are maps in the back of this book for each of these dungeons, and each of the rooms will have special rules. Most of these labyrinths in the back of the book, I have not read them, really. I'd looked into the Cistern and Castle Revolving because they were the two that I could enter from the surface, but I didn't read any spoilers. But after having played the Cistern, I can tell you that it kind of functions like a puzzle. And I don't know if that's how all of these major labyrinths work, but it is so cool. In the Cistern, there are rooms on the map that are marked with a blue circle. These rooms will trigger a card flip that may rise or increase the water level in the Cistern itself, specifically the treasure room at the very bottom. So throughout the entire exploration of this labyrinth, we need to attempt to get the water level down as far as we can so we drain the treasure room of as much water as possible. Now, as we make our way through these rooms, we are going to occasionally find valve pieces. Now, these are narrative, open-ended, basically just components, much like our Inventor Job Pack deck has, that can be used to fix valves, which will be found in other rooms. When we discover a room with a valve, we're going to flip 3 cards, and those will be the current state of that valve. We will have all of our valve pieces that we've collected, and what we need to do is come up with either a sequence or a flush of at least 3 cards in order to fix that valve. So a sequence being a sequential number on the cards. They don't need to have the same color or anything, so it can just be a 3, 4, 5. It can be a 10, Jack, Queen, anything like that. However, 3 is the minimum. You can go up to 6 plus. So if by some miracle we get, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then that's going to reduce the water level by 4. Whereas a sequence or flush of only 3 cards will only reduce the water level by 1. 4 would reduce by 2, and 5 by 3. So as long as we can create sequences or flushes of decent amounts, then we might be able to get this water level down pretty well. It starts at 3. So I think that's all we need to go over as far as how the Cistern works as a giant puzzle. And there are something like 20 rooms as you descend this major labyrinth down towards the treasure room. So let's navigate this Cistern. So the first room of the Cistern is the hole through which you enter it. That is the hole that we created. And normally, getting down to the first room proper, which is room number 2, you're supposed to draw 3 cards and consult a small table that gives you details about the condition of the labyrinth as you find it. So that is where earlier I flipped 1 card. It was the 10 of Hearts, which said that all these surfaces were covered by razor-sharp barnacles, which is why Sybil cut her hand at the very beginning of the cold open. So the second room, the first room that we enter, is the room that we landed and swam out of, and that is where we find our first valve piece. It says draw a card and add it to your inventory. We draw the 6 of clubs. I think that this first room is a large open room. I think that there are large grates and kind of catch basins and things like that throughout these rooms, maybe like on either side of this. Clearly it is heading in one direction. It kind of spirals down almost like a whirlpool, if you will, that the water would go down to descend to the bottom of the Cistern. And so when we move our way into the third room, which is much larger, I think that we see water has collected on the floor of this chamber, and as Sybil and her small Rookling companion for the moment begin to walk through, it's sloshing at their ankles. This has a blue circle on it, so we need to flip a card as we enter this room to determine whether or not it increases the water level in the dungeon. The 3 of clubs, so that is not a red card. Red cards are what is going to increase the water level. So we are still at 3 at the moment, and then we get a valve piece, which is the 10 of spades. Okay, so we have a 10 of spades and a 6 of clubs. We have 2 black cards already, on our way to a flush at least. But as we open the door to the next room, all of the water that was ankle deep in the room we were just leaving begins to flow downward towards this next room and add to the water level in the next room. And that's when Sybil realizes the construction of this place. She is an inventor. She's a tinkerer. She is somebody who fixes things, builds things, can understand design. She sees the water all begin flowing towards the door that she just opened, towards the next room of this mega dungeon below the surface that she has found herself, has fallen into. And as all of this water begins to spill forth into the next room, she walks forward with her Rookling friend, and they walk forward, and sure enough, this next room also is a water level check room, and it is now somewhere between ankle and knee deep, somewhere mid-shin now, with all of the water that just left the previous room. And as she looks around, she sees that there are large curbs almost, or berms, but they are made of clearly worked stone. They almost look like dams, if you will, on the sides of the room. However, if the water level sloshes up and over those, it drains straight down. It will not flow through this room. Water that goes above this will just flush out and go down into the descending floors. Let's flip the card to check this one. Sure enough, there it is, the 5 of Hearts, which means that the water level is going to increase. So it is up to 4 now, and that is when Sybil realizes all this water sloshing over these small little like check dams causes the water to go up and overflow and then sink down, and she can hear the water as it goes through this drain. Some of it maybe gets redirected. She can hear it in pipes in the walls. In the walls, these pipes are transporting water in between the stonework of this large subterranean dungeon. What is going on? The wheels in Sybil's head are spinning. I think she spends more time in this room kind of following the sound, and in other places it sounds like the water just goes straight through and water falls down because she can hear the splashing of the water as it lands on other water or floors below, in the floors beneath her. And she knows that at some point she must continue to descend. How deep does this go? So the water level is increased to 4, but in this room, we find an item. So we're going to draw on the item table to see what we find, and that's way back in Colossal, the core book. I drew a 7 of diamonds, which says a tame animal in a subterranean cistern. I don't know why, but my first thought was like an otter, like a cave otter, if that makes any sense. There's a lot of water in here. As the water levels fluctuate, it can swim its way between levels maybe, or things like that. And we did say that there are barnacles and presumably mollusks kind of latching onto creating these oyster beds or, shellfish beds all over this place. So the food must be pretty good. Let's go with an otter. And I think that as we go into this next room, or we're in this room where the water has overflowed, it kind of bobs to the surface and looks at Sybil and the small Rookling that is next to her curiously, inquisitively, not maliciously, obviously, at all. This is a small otter, and I think that Sybil walks over to it just to kind of take a look at it and say, wow, there's things living down here. This is crazy. And she sees that it has a small mechanical device in its hand that it looks like, if you know anything about sea otters, they like to carry their favorite stones, which they use to open shellfish and things like that. So I love the idea of this one having something that maybe isn't the perfect tool for the job, but Sybil would definitely have the perfect tool for the job. So I think that she's going to offer it a trade. And we're just going to consult the oracle tables in Colossal, which are in the Roomlands book. And these are very simple oracles. If you've listened to me before, you know that I use oracles a lot. Starforged has obviously ask the oracle, yes, no, 50-50 chance, etc., as well as action theme oracles. In Colossal, there is a generic resolution one where you just flip a card, and based on whether or not it is red or black, that is no or yes, respectively. So low red cards, bad. High red cards, not as bad, but still no. Low black cards, yes, but complication. High black cards is yes, but bonus. So let's go ahead and see. I got a King of Clubs. It's pretty much as good as it gets. In fact, that is as good as it gets because aces are low in this game. So that is yes with a bonus. So I think that Sybil and this Rookling walk over to the otter, and it probably does not see many people or anything like that, so it is curious, and as Sybil offers it, maybe like a chisel or something, even just something small, like a tiny little hooked tool that it can use to pry open all of these mussels or shellfish, it excitedly takes it and swims around excitedly and tests it out. It uses it to scrape a barnacle or two off and then jams it right in and pops them open and has a nice little snack. And Sybil, to her, that would have been enough. What a fun thing to watch. Like, what an interesting, hey, look at that, I'm helping. But instead, this otter actually swims away and comes back. And the bonus is going to be, I just want some more inventor job cards. So let's just go ahead and flip, I think with a king, we'll just flip one. We'll see what we get with one. So drawing from, I printed these cards so they're not perfect. They won't sound like a card deck, but I'll just flip the first one and, oh, it's so good. It's very appropriate. Claw. It is a small component, sharp-bladed component that can be connected to another to either deal damage as a weapon or inscribe marks onto a surface. It is very sharp. Ooh, so it traded us something that looks like the thing that we gave it that maybe didn't work as well. And yeah, Sybil's definitely going to work with that, with our crank and lock and key. The lock and key is throwing me right now, but I think we can obviously come up with some stuff for a crank and a claw. All right. Well, that was a fun room, even though the water level went up to 4. And moving on to the next room, it is our first room with a valve. So we're going to flip 3 cards and lay them out in front of us, and then we can choose to create a sequence or a flush with the cards that we've drawn so far, the 6 of clubs and the 10 of spades. If we can make something, that might be worth it. Or we can always revisit this room later. However, you only get one chance to make a valve functional. So we need to be careful because we don't want to just do 3 and then 3 and then 3 and only reduce it by 1 every time, because that won't get the water level low enough. All right, let's see what we get when we flip our 3 cards. We get a Jack of Diamonds, a Queen of Spades. Ooh, so we already have one. And then a 4 of Hearts. Okay. Should we do the run of 3 to reduce the water level by 1? It's our first one. I think that's probably worth it. And then the way that this works is you need to fix the valve by creating that sequencer flush. So we can actually take that 4 of Hearts, I think, and keep it as a valve piece for a future one, which leaves us with a 4 and a 6, which is pretty good. All right, so we'll reduce the water level back down to 3. And I think that we once again get a scene of maybe she's not being patient. Sybil is not being patient at the moment to figure this out, because the first thing she needs to do is figure out how it works, right? She's not fixing the whole thing right now. She's figuring out the mechanism. She is basking in it. As she opens this door and all of the water from the 4th room spills into the valve room, there's no water in here because there is a broken valve. It looks like at some point it was turned and water was flushed out of here, but at this point it looks well forgotten, in very poor condition, and she cannot wait to run forward and take a look at what is going on. It looks like in the center of this valve room there is a vertical, like one of those wheels that you would turn to open or close the valve, and it is set into a pipe that is just vertical. It's going from like ceiling to floor, and it also is connected to, it seems like it would turn and open or shut slats, right? So like if you close it, it would overlap with what would normally be openings, but if you open it, it would create these openings that would flush all of this water out of maybe the room in either straight down or out through the walls into a different system or something like that. And Sybil is in her glory. She is loving tracing every single one of these mechanisms to one another. I almost love thinking of this like a Rube Goldberg machine. It's a little overly complicated, but it works so well if you can just get it started. And Sybil does manage to fix it enough that she can turn it, and everything works as this room flushes out a good amount of water, and it reveals the next room is a staircase which descends to the next level. The first few rooms of the second level of the cistern are similar. Sybil is getting her feet under her and figuring out what to look for, the mechanisms that are at work here in the cistern. She's looking at the walls as she descends the stairs, seeing if there are pipes that are moving water from one room to another, or if there's just grates and drains and different things. She's constantly being followed by this small ice rookling that she rescued. And the next few rooms are a mixture of testing what the limits of dangerous steps and things might be. She finds a few more pieces that can be used for valves, including a 2 of diamonds and a jack of spades. In one of the rooms, she notices that there's going to be one of those water checks and flips a king of clubs, a black card, so the water doesn't rise. But in the next room, she flips the ace of diamonds, a red card, which means that the water level goes up. And I'd love to think that this is because of the rookling. Sybil is starting to put together what she needs to be on the lookout for as she is making her way through the cistern. But this small rookling is maybe protective because it saved her, and these rooklings are, their own kind of unique personalities and things like that. This one is a small attack type ice rookling, and I think maybe for one of the rooms, maybe it goes first to say, this might be dangerous, I'm going to protect you. And in stepping in, it just immediately steps on a tile or trigger or something that all of a sudden displaces all of this volume of water, and the water in this room rises and once again goes down, flooding further levels below. But as that water is flooded and drains out of this room to presumably go somewhere else and, flood more of the lower levels of this cistern, it does allow Sybil to find one more valve piece, which will be the ace of clubs. I think she looks down at the rookling and says, hey, I appreciate the help, little guy, but maybe stay behind me from now on. And we know she's not the biggest fan of rooklings. I think that they're the least controllable kind of thing in her otherwise very much shut things down, fix things, tinker, etc. preference for doing things in her life, that this is a wild card, no pun intended, that she is kind of happy is there in case things go bad, but is not eager to give the lead to. So as she enters the next room with this small rookling, it is another room with one of those valves. So we have to flip 3 cards to see what the condition of this valve is at the moment here on the second level, and we get a king of hearts, a 5 of clubs, and a 3 of diamonds. Okay. Oh, hold on a second. Whoa. I can do some stuff here. With this, we have a 3 and a 5 from this spread, and I have saved the 4 of hearts, we pulled the 2 of diamonds, and we pulled the ace of clubs. We also have a jack of spades, but we have ace, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as a sequence. Oh my gosh, that's enormous. Hold on, I have to... That's the most you can get. Any sequence or flush of 6+ will reduce the water level score by 4, which is exactly what we are at right now. And we can purge and release all of this water. That is incredible. And this is so fitting that Sybil is a rooksmith and an inventor, and she has been taking the time to look at every contraption and mechanism and how this lost ancient dungeon, this cistern, works. If anyone else fell down here, they might just be fumbling around trying to figure anything out, but Sybil has a skill set that is uniquely qualified to help her succeed here, and a 6 sequence is going to purge the entire lower levels of all of that water. So I think that we see her, it clicks, the light bulb goes off, and all of a sudden she is fully in control here. She is swapping out pieces. She takes one of her tools. She uses her arm to maybe bend a piece of metal so she can fit it in somewhere, turn things. She is absolutely doing maintenance that has probably not been done in this cistern for untold amounts of time. And it's like she is so familiar with it that it was never lost. And she manages to get everything in place, and she looks at it, she looks up, she wipes her forehead. The small Rookling is looking up at it, very confused at the complexity of the connections and the various valve pieces she has placed in here to make work. And she just looks up at it and smiles and just goes, "Hey, watch this." And she grabs with her arm and her 2 physical human arms, all 3 of them pull this enormous wheel for the valve, and a shudder goes through this entire cistern. We hear like groans and creaks, and then like a as all of the water down below, we can hear it just flush and release. Like it is echoing through these stone caverns of the cistern all the way up to the level that we are at right now. It takes a minute, but then it stops, and maybe there's a slight like kind of gurgle of maybe a little bit kind of just like failing to go down or what have you, but everything has been released at this point. And Sybil looks down at the Rookling again and smiles and just goes, "I wonder what that did." Alright, there are only 2 rooms left on the second level, and that is one here where we do have to do a water level check, which is going to be, of course it is a hearts. So the water level that we just reduced down to 0 goes back to 1. Maybe that gurgling that we heard is actually maybe like a little bit of like a backfill, right? Like everything that got flushed out, there was maybe one like pipe or something like that where it just kind of flowed back. There's a little bit of water still down there, but Sybil definitely did an insane amount of work with this valve she just walked by. And then, oh, for this one, we actually find something that isn't a valve piece. It says, you find a sandbag you can use to prevent water from flowing through doors. If you place this in a room, you can ignore its water trigger. You can only place it once. Okay, so if we put it down, we can't pick it up at the end of that room, carry it to the next one, put it down, etc. But that's cool. So basically it allows us a free ignore this water check. That's pretty sweet, actually. So let's go ahead and descend. I think we definitely see Sybil give this sandbag to the small ice Rookling and is like, this is the perfect way to keep it busy and keep it from going ahead or touching anything it's not supposed to. She's like, hey, you carry this heavy sandbag, and it happily does so. And they descend the stairs to the 3rd level of the cistern. On the staircase down to the 3rd level of the cistern, Sybil finds another valve piece. That's going to be a 2 of spades. All right. So we have a jack of spades, a 2 of spades, and a king of hearts. And then we move into the next room, which is, on the map at least, this room is the biggest room we've probably been in so far. And because we are in the 3rd level, just for foreshadowing purposes, I think that this large room, you can hear the dripping of water. You can hear more of an echo below because of all of the water that has been flushed out from the levels below. Yet I think that Sybil hears something. Let's go ahead and flip an oracle. Once again, as a reminder, red cards are no's and black cards are yeses for this oracle, but low cards are usually yes or no with a complication, and high cards are yes or no but with an upside. So here goes. We're going to flip a card and get a 7 of hearts, which is right down the middle. So that's just a flat no. Okay, I was going to foreshadow something, but I don't think that Sybil can quite make sense of it. I will describe the sound she hears. There's like a constant rhythmic kind of like thump, thump, thump. But she can't find where it's coming from, and she can't figure out why it would be making this noise in this cavern. So she continues cautiously as she makes her way through the 3rd level of the cistern. And in this room, we are supposed to do a water check, but I think I'm just going to use that sandbag. We're currently at 1 for the water level, and I don't have a lot of cards to make a big sequencer run. I would need a lot of help from the flip for the last valve, so I'm going to sandbag this room and ignore the water level check. We do still, however, get a valve piece in this room, and that is going to be a 8 of hearts, so right next to our 7 of hearts that we just drew. But, okay, so actually it's a good thing because we sandbagged and I flipped a red card, so that means that would have been an increase in the water level. So, sandbag was a good call. All right, the next room is a valve room, so we're going to flip 3 cards to figure out what we can do, what state this valve is in, and if we have any means of fixing it with the tools on hand or the pieces that we have. And we flip 3 cards, the King of Spades, the 10 of Diamonds, and the 8 of Spades. Well, I haven't done a flush yet, and we do have 2 spades here, and 2 spades in our hand, so we could spend 4 black cards to reduce the water level. Oh, but we don't need to. We only need to spend 1. So let's spend the 2 of spades to do a flush to remove the water level that is down there at 1 to bring it back down to 0. And that will leave our hand with an 8 of hearts, a 10 of diamonds, a jack of spades, and a king of hearts, which leaves us pretty well prepared for another sequence if we can just draw 1 good card. All right, that seems pretty good. And moving on through the 3rd level, there are a few rooms left before we descend. So we have to check the water level in the next 2 rooms. The Queen of Clubs means no water level increase, so we are still at 0. And we find a second sandbag. Do we just use it right away? I mean, we can see the map. Again, Sybil doesn't know how close to the bottom she is. I do as the player because I can look at the map. But I think that Sybil is also a handy person, a crafty person. You know, it's one thing to have the tool on hand when you need it, but why not use it to save yourself trouble? So I think that the very next room, we're supposed to do a check, and we're just going to sandbag it. So let's see what it would have been. Perfect. A 6 of diamonds. So instead, that is the valve piece that we find, and we were 2 for 2 on sandbags. That's awesome. And the water level does not increase where it normally would have in this next room. And I think that Sybil pats the little ice rookling on the head and says, "Don't get your hopes up, but I think we might just get out of here." Walking through the door of this last chamber into the staircase, Sybil and the ice rookling begin to descend down. Except this time, it doesn't sound like they're heading to an empty chamber. And before she knows it, she's descending, and the stairs themselves are being buffeted by waves. And she takes the final 2 steps down into water that goes up over her ankles, then up over her knees, and then all the way up to her waist. She enters the 4th floor and realizes that this large chamber is filled waist deep with water. And in the very center is a medium-sized rook that is part of a structure within the cistern itself. She hears a familiar sound. Thump, thump, thump. A rhythmic pounding. And as she looks up, soaked to the waist, she sees a column in the center of this enormous chamber below the ground. And it's a piston. Something is moving up and down, and every time it rises and falls, the medium rook in the center of the room rises and falls. As it does, it creates huge circular waves that move outward, buffeting against anything and anyone in the room. You can see the splash and the wet marks all along the circular walls of this room at the ends, and Sybil looks around trying to figure out what is it she is supposed to do here. But as soon as this rook in the middle notices her presence, it turns on that circular column that is a part of, and it looks at her, rises high, and lands low, creating this enormous wave that is pulsing out at her. And we are going to go to combat against the Wave Rook. The Wave Rook has a combat score of 5 and a magic type of Rumble. It does not have a weapon, and every time it attacks, it slams into the water, sending a huge wave out. This is how damage will be done if we take some. Anytime that we flip a diamond for the Rook, then it adds 1 to the water level score of the treasure room below, as it makes waves so big it washes up against the walls and out through a drain down to the treasure room below. So ideally, we do not flip any diamond cards because we are currently at 0. It says here, in order to defeat this Rook, we need to get close enough to deactivate it by climbing up and turning a switch on its head. Okay. A reminder for our armed class that we have a 4 in our combat score, so we're going to flip 4 cards right at the beginning here to know what we have at our disposal as we go up against this Wave Rook. We get a 5 of diamonds. Ooh, not a good start. An 8 of diamonds. Also not good. A 7 of spades. Oh gosh, I need a card. Come on. A 2 of clubs. Okay, we do not have good cards going into this combat, and we are going to have to flip 5 cards for the Wave Rook to see if we can overcome them. Oh boy, that's not promising. Alright, here we go. We are going to flip the first card for the Wave Rook. Ooh, it is a 6 of spades, which means it is an unarmed attack, but we have a 7 of spades, which means that we can spend a card, minimally above it, but still win, and that would constitute a critical hit. If we play a higher card of the same suit, then we disable the enemy, and it decreases the number of attacks that they have left in the round by 1, meaning we only have to flip 3 more cards after this. Okay, with an unarmed attack, I think that I've decided that unarmed attacks for Sybil include her arm. So I think that as these waves begin coming out again in waves, this piston, this medium Rook is kind of jumping, and the intensity and speed at which it is going up and down and creating these waves, these concentric waves out against the walls of this chamber down at the bottom of the cistern, it is angry. And I think that Sybil starts to run forward, but you cannot exactly run very quick or easily if you are in waist-deep water. You are just fighting. You are just churning against that water. And I think that what she does is she uses her arm. It is sticking out of kind of like the center of her back, right in between her shoulder blades. It usually hovers up over one of her shoulders like a third arm as tools. But what she does this time is it's up there. She kind of caps the end of it and uses it almost like a pole vault arm, except from behind. So she starts to move forward, but this thing pushes against the ground. She lifts herself up and pushes herself, doing these small little leaps, which actually make it easier too. As the waves come forward, she can lift herself up so that the waves do not go up over her head. Meanwhile, she's looking at the small little ice rookling trying to do its own version of getting through here, and she tells it, when these come, freeze it and dive right through it. And it takes a little bit of time, but the ice rookling starts to get the hang of it. And we have critically succeeded on our first card here, which is awesome. Let's see what the next card is. The Ace of Hearts. Now, triple checking. Yes, aces are low in this game, meaning anything beats them, and we have a 2. This is perfect. Okay, so we have the 2 of clubs, which is a weapon attack. Now, our weapon, we said, was kind of like a segmented pole arm, like a 3-section staff, but it can be mostly kept in one large staff-like piece or taken apart with different heads and movable pieces and things like that. But I think that for this, with a critical hit on our last one, we are getting closer to the center of this room faster than I think this medium Rook could have anticipated. Sybil has begun timing every up and down of the piston and the waves that are coming forward, and she is making very quick progress towards the center. The Rookling is trying its best to keep up, and she gets her staff out. And I think that what she's going to do is she's going to switch how she is propelling herself up, and what she's going to do is she's going to stick her staff down against the ground and kind of heave herself up and use her arm on her back instead of pushing down and pole vaulting. The arm is going to reach up and grab on to the platform in the center of the room that this rook keeps landing on, creating these waves that are blasting out. And we've already gotten close enough to this thing to figure out if there's a way for us to maybe deactivate it or what we have to do to defeat it. Break the column, anything like this. Sybil's inventor Rooksmith mind is wheeling at the moment, trying to figure out, okay, how do I stop this thing from being a little too aggressive at the moment? The Rookling is still just a little bit behind. Let's flip the third card. Oh, the 9 of diamonds. So the water level is going to go up a little bit as Sybil is approaching and she gets this close. Her arm reaches up. We see it kind of whatever form it has. Maybe it is like a hand at the moment. Grabs on and starts pulling her up right in front of this medium rook that is attached to this central piston column. And it looks angry as she is getting this close. It comes down with a forceful bang, creating one of the biggest waves we've seen yet. And it is going to overflow certain sections of this room, flooding the chamber below. But it is a 9, and I don't have anything higher than a 9, so we're going to have to take a harm here, and I think that I'm going to get rid of my 5 of diamonds. Diamonds are creative attacks, and I think that the way this is going to manifest is the Rookling is at the edge, and Sybil is reaching down to try and grab it to bring it up to help, and I think that this wave blasts it, and I think that it innately tries to basically freeze the water, so that way it can maybe climb up or it's a solid surface. But what it does is it freezes a section of the water that just gets pushed by more water, and it just kind of gets pushed far away. But the idea is there. Our other card is also a diamond, so I think that we're going to try this again. Sybil's looking around and saying, I think we can do this. She uses her arm and her weapon to reach it out so this ice Rookling can grab on, and she starts pulling it forward. Let's see what the last card is. That is another ace. That is the ace of spades. So that is a 1. We can beat it with whatever we want. We have our 8 of diamonds, and that is going to be another creative attack. I think that this time Sybil pulls the small ice Rookling up, and she says, hey, use your ice and freeze all of the water that has splashed all over this column that this thing keeps going up and down. And it does. It reaches out and it sprays a bunch of ice with its big Rookling hands, and it freezes this column, and it just kind of grinds this medium rook to a slow halt. It's not going to hold it for long, but it's going to hold it long enough that Sybil can jump up on top and look for any kind of mechanism where she may be able to deactivate this wave rook. And she looks around. She's switching out her tools and things. She pulls something out of her tool belt and just says, all right, it's not elegant, but I don't have time for elegant. And she jams it down into this thing, pries open a little spot, reaches down and finds like a connection to the Rookling inside the heart, and she just separates it for a second, and we feel this entire medium rook just stop trying to go up and down and work on this central piston column. Instead, it just sits and deactivates. Wow, that was awesome. Now, technically, I mean, I'm assuming the treasure for this combat is going to be what's down below, but just for fun, because we're playing the inventor and we'll see how much we use this, I am going to say we find a couple components. So let's flip cards from the inventor job pack deck, and we get a bucket, fitting for a cistern dungeon, that's very funny, and a coupling, which I feel like also kind of makes sense for the piston setup that they had here. Can you tell I am not mechanically inclined? However, those seem to make sense for me. I think that's really good. Coupling could actually be really interesting for like turning her arm into like a launching thing. Well, okay, that's not the important part. The important part is that this has been deactivated, and now all of the waves throughout this room have stilled, and the surface of the water on this level of the dungeon of the cistern is calming. The thumping, the rhythmic sounds of the piston going up and down have silenced, and Sybil takes a second to look around. Now that the wave rook has been deactivated, it rises up out of the water and stops all the way at the ceiling. Ooh, interesting. So Sybil and the Rookling feel it start to turn back on just to go sit at the top of the ceiling. They jump off of it back into the waist-deep water, seeing where this goes, but as it rises, it reveals a trapdoor in the floor surrounded by a waist-high wall that prevents the water from draining out of the room down into here. The trapdoor leads down to another room, and there's nothing but a ladder descending into the darkness. It says here you can only enter this treasure room once per visit to the labyrinth. We could always come back here and try and defeat this labyrinth again, not letting the water level go to 1 in the very last fight. What a bummer that was. However, not for this series. That's not how we play this game. We are going to say that this was our one and done experience in the Cistern. So let's see what the treasure room holds for Sybil. Heading down the ladder, she sees sprawling out below the collected treasures of the Cistern. Everything that's been washed down here over the centuries, stopped at the grills and grates of the Cistern filter system. The room is tiered, each tier being so deep that it would be impossible to reach the bottom in a single lungful of air. Luckily, we drained all of the water, so we basically get all of the treasure from all of the levels that we managed to flush out. Now, that would have been all the way down to 0, which is like the legendary thing that I'm not going to say what it is, because if you are going to play Colossal and you are going to play the Cistern Major Labyrinth, you get to know when you find it yourself. However, we get to choose everything from 6+ all the way down to 1 for the water level. So that's awesome. Let's see what that is. On the topmost tier, there are a lot of things that have flushed down, but mostly what Sybil sifts through and finds that has any kind of value whatsoever are 10 labyrinth treasures. Now, these are special treasures that you will only find in the labyrinths, and they are worth 2 regular treasures each, or standard treasures as they're called. And labyrinth treasures come in the form of one of 4 different types of things based on the suits. So let's go ahead and find out what those are, and we can sort them. Now, not only that, labyrinth treasures, if you draw a face card of the suit, then it's actually a rare treasure. And I'm assuming that's how these work, so let's go ahead and figure it out. Diamonds are rings, so we'll find rings to wear upon the hand. Hearts are cups, spades are shards, and clubs are keys. Now, each of these does a different thing, especially if you find the rare one. The rare ones will have specific uses. The rest basically just worth 2 standard treasures. So let's flip 10 cards and see what we get. We ended up with 4 rings, 2 keys, 1 cup, 1 shard, and 2 rare labyrinth treasures. We drew the Queen of Hearts and the Queen of Diamonds, which got us the Goblet of Divining, which says, if drunk before an exploration phase, you can choose what one of your exploration prompts is from the exploration tables. This lasts for 1 exploration phase. It says to use a rare cup, you must first fill it with water and then drink from it. So we need to find water down here in the dungeons, which luckily we have. So let's remember that for next episode. And the rare ring that we found is the Resonating Ring. This allows us to find a labyrinth in every exploration phase in the dungeons regardless of what you draw. So we can choose to find a labyrinth whenever we want. And maybe a spoiler, I'm not sure. We'll see how the rest of this Dungeons campaign goes. I'd like to do more of these labyrinths. They're really cool. Alright, that was the 6th tier, and we have 5 more to go. On the 5th tier, you find a wealth of standard treasures, things that Sybil knows if she gets back to the surface or finds people down here are worth trading. So we get 10 standard treasures, just things that she knows she can barter with and get money for if she finds somebody to trade with. On the 4th tier, you find a huge collection of broken rook parts. This is probably a gold mine, honestly, for Sybil. So maybe we draw 1. I'm going to say we're going to draw 1 component here, but it also says among them you find a poor rookling still alive, stuck under debris. It was clearly washed down here. We will adopt another rookling. I'm not anticipating Sybil traveling with these rooklings being like a followed class. Instead, I think that she's just going to keep them around until she can find a place to give them to someone else, right? So let's pick one more component, and it is a spring launcher. Ooh, speaking of the coupling and the thing we just had, it says this is a small component, spring-loaded plate that can be activated with a switch or other energy input. Can provide a rapid ejection energy to a projectile or move something into place within a system. Ooh, spring launcher sounds fun. I think we're going to have a cannon arm before we know it. And not cannon like the weapon. Like, I think like to launch grappling hooks or just have like an extendo arm or something like that. Sounds fun. All right, and let's actually flip for the Rookling type. If we do this, we have to go to the create an opponent section of the first book, and we're going to flip, and we're going to just flip its body type, so attack or defense, and its magic type. It is a defensive body type, and it is an electric rook, so electric defense. Ooh, so like this thing just creates like electric barriers is what this does. It has like electric shields that it generates to protect itself. That's fun. That's a fun little buddy. I like that. It's going to be really hard for me not to love these Rooklings, but I'm going to try my best. All right, descending down to the third tier of the Cistern, we continue to find more interesting things, including 2 potion bottles, one of which will heal 1 wound. So we might as well just take that now because we did suffer a wound in the last one. So we're going to still be at full 3 exploration score, 4 combat score. And then the other, ooh, this is interesting, increases all your combat card values by 1 for 1 whole battle. Ooh, that's cool. Let's hold on to that one. On the second tier, Sybil finds a weapon. Ooh, weapons have gathered on this tier. You find a rook scythe that gives weapon attack, so that's any club we flip, +3 in combat. Is there a way to... We can have our arm wield this for now. This big scythe. That's kind of fun. And also maybe... There may be a way as the inventor to maybe take the blade off or create a detachable head to put it on our own staff. But either way, rook scythe sounds pretty gnarly. And then the last tier that we have access to before the overflow of the fight with the Wave Rook filled the last section of the Cistern says that there's a lot of rubbish on this second to last tier. But searching through it, you find a unique rookstone. This is her calling. This is what she wanted. This is what she wanted. This is what... Oh, this is so perfect. Okay, we found a unique rookstone known as the Whisper Stone. This allows you to move silently. Additionally, spectral rooks will not attack you while this is equipped. This is perfect. Let's end this episode with maybe the Rooklings that have been rescued are looking at the water, looking further down, like pointing to Sybil, but Sybil does not care about what might be at the depths of that water on the last tier because she just found something that validates everything she has believed her whole life. She knew it. She knew there was truth to the stories that her mother would tell her about rookstones beyond the usual just rumble, ice, and lightning. She knew there were more. And that means that not only is this unique, or at the very least insanely rare and lost to the conventional use up in the Roomlands and the Colossal, this is potential for something. And she holds it close to her heart. And I think we see even a tear of a lifetime worth of holding on to this dream and not letting it die, being fulfilled. Just as she is celebrating this find, there is a deafening rumble. It develops into a crashing sound of flowing water, and it's getting closer. The Cistern is flushing itself. Sybil gathers the last of the treasures, and she gives a bunch to the Rooklings and yells, "Come on, follow, we gotta get out of here, we gotta get out of here." Water begins bursting into the chamber from vents all around the walls up ahead. We are about to be swept off our feet and flushed out. I think that we find a storm drain and we just start running. Sybil and the Rooklings jump out the end of the storm drain just as water begins to flush out behind them. And as they land and get to their feet soaking wet, all of the treasures accounted for, Sybil once again just looks around and finds herself just in a large corridor carved by nothing but it must have been erosion and water, an underground river. It's just empty at the moment. It's just a natural cave and passageway. She looks back at the way they jumped out from the storm drain, but there is no way to get back up there. Sybil looks down the hallway, looks at the Rooklings and says, "All right, kids, come on. It's only one way to go, and we got to find a way out of here." And that's where we're going to end this episode of Colossal Dungeons. That major labyrinth was so fun. I love that it was both exploration-like and also a puzzle. I got incredibly lucky. That 6 sequence felt so good when I flipped those cards and went, hold on a second. I highly recommend people check this game out. I can't say it enough. Go get Colossal. It's such a fun solo experience. The cards, I know there are some people who don't like cards as mechanics, but let me tell you, this one, it doesn't feel repetitive. It really does keep you on your toes, and it's really fun to interpret what every card means every time you flip one. It's great. All right, time for the closing spiel. You know where to find me. Look up Rene Plays Games on all the social medias. Feel free, please do email me at reneplaysgamespod@gmail.com if you want to talk about anything, games, ideas, criticisms, constructive, ideally, please. Or, just let me know if you want to hear more of anything else. If you want to talk more frequently and just about whatever, you can always join the DMs After Dark Discord. The link will be in the description and it will be updated. So if you ever need to join, just go to the most recent episode and that one will have a good link. I guess they expire after 1 week and I can't be bothered to update all of them. Other than that, and here's the last ones, rate and review if you haven't already on your podcatcher of choice, just so more nerds find us and we create a more fun community of nerds. And then yeah, I got a coffee if you feel super generous, but no worries. Check out my games. Go explore. Have fun. I'll see you next time.